What is up, wrestling fans? Yes, you're hearing someone else's voice instead of Tony's to start this podcast because we're going to be talking about New Japan Pro Wrestling and, in particular, Wrestle Kingdom 13 and New Year's Dash. And who's we? Well, I am your host for this evening, Callum Wiggins, and joining me on this show is Robert DeFelice.
Well, thank you, Callum, and I must say, it's interesting to hear somebody else's voice, but this will be our time to talk about New Japan and give Tony a little break to get a little bit of rest.
For context, Tony did watch Wrestle Kingdom 13 with us, but it was just a sense, probably due to the fact that it was on so late in the evening in the US. Obviously started 2 a.m. in the morning and just ran through for about 5 hours. I don't think he really grasped the magnitude of some of the matches because he doesn't watch it regularly. He's not really familiar with the storylines associated with it.
Yeah, he did watch it. There's some things he liked, but he said he wouldn't have much to add, so he kind of said we could take the reins on this one.
Yes, and we'll try and do our very best to hold up his very high standards by giving a match-by-match breakdown of everything that happened at Wrestle Kingdom 13, as well as lacing in the events that transpired at New Year's Dash, which both me and Rob just finished watching, just so we can add a little bit of context to see where New Japan seems to be heading forward after what happened at Wrestle Kingdom. So let's start with the pre-show, which was a gauntlet match to determine the next number one contenders for the Never Openweight six-man tag team championships. And essentially the teams involved were the Most Violent Players, which is the combination of Toby McAvey, Toriano, and Rizuki Taguchi. Excuse my pronunciation of some of these names. It's not going to always be at the highest standard. And they were the team that won, defeating Yuji Nagata, Jeff Cobb, and David Finlay, the Chaos team of Hiroki Goto, Beretta, and Chucky T, the Suzuki Goon combination of Minoru Suzuki, Lance Archer, and Davey Boy Smith, and the Elite's combination of Hangman Page, Yujiro Takahashi, and Marty Scurll. So the match in general, it was kind of just there as the most part. I mean, it was fun, but it was a gauntlet match, so all the matches were pretty short. There wasn't really too. Yeah, it wasn't exceptionally exciting, but it served its purpose and it helped determine like a match that would take place at New Year's Dash. So, thumbs up for the most part.
Yeah, it was good. I think one of the bigger angles was what happened with the Elite trio, where they're kind of phasing out the Marty Scurll and the Hangman Pages, as they won't really be working in New Japan. And it was won by the Most Violent Players. Good effort from everybody involved, but nothing to really write home about.
Yeah, like you say, the most interesting aspect was like within the very first match, the infighting within the Elites, and that ended up translating into what happened in New Year's Dash, because you might as well talk about the actual match that took place for the number one contenders, which was Most Violent Players then took on Tamatonga, Tungaloa, and Taiji Ishimori for the six-man championships at New Year's Dash. And they didn't win because Yujiro Takahashi and Chase Owens essentially rejoined with Bullet Club after being with the Elite for so long. So, like you say, it's a transition period for New Japan with the fact that the Young Bucks, Mighty Skull, Hangman Page, and potentially Kenny Omega. We'll obviously talk about that in more detail going forward. But they will no longer be part of New Japan, or at least not in a featured capacity. So it made sense for Chase Owens and Yujiro Takahashi to go back to Bullet Club.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously have plans for Chase Owens, and Takahashi, he's not going to go anywhere, so better to just sign them up where they belong. Bullet Club. It's a little changing to not see much of the Elite, or let's just say not really see any of the Elite after the events of last night, but it was really New Japan getting back to its roots.
I think obviously we could talk about some more general things because this was only the pre-show, it was before the main show, but it gave a lot of people that probably deserved an opportunity to appear in the Tokyo Dome, like Minoru Suzuki and Hangman Page, who had a great year. Yuji Nagata, who's obviously a legend. But we probably used this opportunity to also talk about just any general thoughts you had about the set or anything to do with like basically anything to do with Wrestle Kingdom outside of the matches itself.
Well, one thing I liked is even though guys like Suzuki were on the pre-show, they used it as fuel. You know, they weren't just, oh, well, we're on the pre-show and we're honored to be here. No, they used that role as fuel to their fire tonight. And the set for the Tokyo Dome, obviously it's beautiful. It's one of the best presentations of the year. Maybe the best presentation now that, WWE doesn't really do pyro.
They don't
So
do like interesting sets outside of WrestleMania, but this is New Japan's WrestleMania, so I guess it makes sense to have special events on there.
And I thought it was a very good looking set. And I like the pre-show. It gave you the entire schedule for this year, which as a traditional WWE fan, you don't get. They don't just say, okay, here's everything we're doing. Here's what you need to look forward to. New Japan seems very organized, and that really came through on this pre-show.
Yeah, they seem to plan very well ahead. Like, as Rob was just saying, they released the entire schedule for the new year, which included events that will be taking place in the US and in the UK as well, which is obviously exciting for me. And they also announced that next year, both the Tokyo Dome shows and the New Year Dash show would both be taking place inside the Tokyo Dome. So Wrestle Kingdom 14 and New Year's Dash 2020 will be in the Tokyo Dome, which is great because like this show was completely packed. Like reports coming in from basically anyone that was in attendance at the event that it would have been like pretty much max capacity. So it's a good sign.
And that's what you need from New Japan as they're continuing to expand. I know we've talked a lot about where the Elite is going, but they're still very much dedicated to their Western expansion. You got shows. The G1 Climax is starting in Dallas, Texas this year.
Yeah, that was another big talking point.
You've got the show in the UK. You've got the G1 Supercard, by the way, which even though, yes, it's kind of a Ring of Honor show, it's still being called the G1 Supercard. It's not being called the Supercard of Honor. And it's going to be an interesting year.
So before we move on, obviously we talked about the set. Let's talk about something that we while watching felt a little bit like on the fence about. Was the commentary. It was mainly, this combination of Kevin Kelly and Don Callis is always fantastic and is far better than pretty much any commentary team that WWE has right now, at least in my opinion.
Correct.
But the issue came with Chris Charlton, who is the essentially translator and historian for New Japan. Now I've heard a lot of praise about him, read a lot of praise for his work. I think our disconnect came with just his tone of voice, and I don't think he's like a natural on commentary just yet, and he hasn't done very much in like beyond just like translate for what the Japanese wrestlers are saying for the English audiences, and he does a good job at that because he seems to pick it up really quickly, which is incredibly useful.
Let me just say, he's a phenomenal author with the book Eggshells and Lion's Pride. He's very knowledgeable. He kind of reminds me of that 97 Mike Tenay in WCW, where he's very knowledgeable, but his commentary isn't there just yet. And I think it will get there one day. But for now, Kevin Kelly, who's really carrying the load, does a phenomenal job.
Oh, absolutely. Kevin Kelly was on point in this entire show. I think it will just take some getting used to for Chris Charlton. And it's not like he did a terrible job or anything. It's just maybe we just weren't so used to the tone of voice. It's the Mike Tenay thing comes it's a very good comparison because Mike Tenay could be a bit much. Like he's somebody who you could tell just knew more about wrestling than pretty much anybody else that would be watching at that time. But that can sometimes be intimidating or come across as a little bit hard to interact with because with the best kind of commentators like Jim Ross or Mauro Ranallo, it's more about the passion and excitement and that's I guess impactful voice. Whereas he's more about just reciting the facts, reciting the information, talking about a lot about the history, and he doesn't have the personality to match just yet anyway.
Yeah, and I think it will come over time, but he's a vital part of the expansion. I think the key is whether they have the top foreign stars or not. They want to expand into the US, and they're doing so, and Chris is a huge part of that. And over time, especially working with a master like Kevin Kelly, he will get much better at this.
I guess it's all now with just the general details and the before we move on to the first match of the main show, what was your overall thoughts of Wrestle Kingdom 13?
I thought it was very good. I saw a lot of criticism of people because, let's be honest, this is the WrestleMania. This is where people who don't normally watch tune in, and I saw criticism of people saying, well, it didn't blow me away. But it was a very solid show, and unlike you, I actually got the chance to watch it twice, and on the second time around, it almost appeared even more solid than the first time. And was it the 7-star Okada, Tanahashi, oh my god, stop everything you're doing, you have to see what's happening? No, but it was a strong show with a promotion that's focused on the future, but also took a good step back into their roots and what made them a viable promotion in the first place.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of the same points. I thought it was I would go so far to say it was an excellent show in the sense that I don't think any single match disappointed or would be out of place on this sort of card. I don't think it had the same sort of spectacular appeal as Wrestle Kingdom 11 and 12 did, but I'd still put it at a high ranking. It'll be a hard show to beat this year in terms of overall quality, but it set the bar low enough that I can see that happening. And also the interesting thing was that there were only 2 matches that went over 20 minutes in length, which is kind of odd for a big New Japan show. It kept quite concise and compact in just having the 1-hour pre-show and then the 4-hour-long main show. So it was far more. It felt less bloated than I assume WrestleMania will feel this year.
Well, we have to talk about the lack of. There's no backstage skits. There's no. Here's a 20-minute vignette. There was only 3 vignettes on the whole show, and they were for the matches that had the most story and the most animosity. And I think as a result, you get a much smoother, faster show. And even if none of the matches, wowed, they certainly weren't disappointments. And don't get me wrong, there were quite a few on the card that did leave a lasting impression. But I think it goes to show what you can do when you just focus on the wrestling part of wrestling.
Oh yeah, definitely. Just take note, WWE. We don't want to have it's fun to see Legends every now and again, but we don't want to see just dance parties behind the scenes of WrestleMania or Kid Rock 10-minute long anthems and stuff like that. We kind of just want to see the wrestling for the most part.
Yes.
So why don't we just get straight to it with the first match of the night, which was Will Ospreay defeating Kota Ibushi for the Never Openweight Championship. You just say those two names, anyone that's familiar with New Japan knows that this was going to be an excellent match, and it was an excellent match. Personally, I thought it was kind of reined in a little bit due to the fact that they were the opening match. They didn't want to overawe too many people, but the sheer athleticism of both of these two superstars is just absolutely incredible.
These two people are inhuman with their athleticism. They take a lot of, I don't want to say unnecessary risk, but there was a specific point where Ospreay, really slugged Kota Ibushi up to the top rope in a seated position, and Kota just slammed his face on the ring post, and they're so aggressive with everything that they do. Ospreay, when he hits the turnbuckles, he really slams into them, and it makes for such a good show, but you also just you fear for their health as well, I will say, when they did dive, it was very smooth. They connected perfectly, unlike another incident which we'll talk about later. But there was one spot to me that stood out so well, and the second time around was even better looking. Ospreay had Ibushi in the Tree of Woe, and he just started slapping him, and Kota, instead of just taking it from the Tree of Woe position, starts slapping him back, and Ospreay just starts kicking him violently in the head, and one of the coolest things I've seen.
Oh yeah, that was obviously, it's nice to see a little bit more aggression, because between these two you usually expect to see, obviously Kota Ibushi's known for his striking game, but Will Ospreay's more of a high flyer, so for him to get involved and match and at some points dominate Ibushi on the striking game was it's a good transition for him into more of a heavyweight role, which after being a junior heavyweight for basically his entire time in New Japan is something useful. And yeah, there was a lot of seamless transitions, a lot of high flying, a lot of jumps over the ropes. The two things that really stood out to me were the two significant strikes in the match, which was one huge running knee by Kota Ibushi that just seemed to decapitate Ospreay before he attempted to get the Golden Star power bomb, which got a very long near fall, and then go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, that was my phone.
Just yeah, a bit of professionalism here, Rob, please. It's just New Japan here. We've got to be showing Tony how it's done.
I know. Sorry. Jesus.
And then the other one was a Will Ospreay forearm or elbow to the back of Ibushi's head, which looked like you look at that and think, how can you do that safely? Because you see the elbow just clip the back of the head. You have to be so light with it to avoid causing any sort of damage. But maybe he didn't, as we'll discuss in a little bit. And then Ospreay hit the Stormbreaker and got the win, and his first reign as Never Openweight champion.
A lot to unpack here. So, with the knee, they referred to it as Shinsuke Nakamura's Bomaye. And for those who are just strictly on the WWE side, that is the Kinshasa. And they talked a lot about Shinsuke's rivalry with Ibushi on commentary, and how Ibushi looked up to Nakamura, Ospreay looks up to Ibushi. They drew a lot of parallels there. And it was a really vicious knee. I thought the near falls, which is something we should talk about, all the near falls on this show were masterful. They were really having you thinking the match was over.
Oh yeah, the timing is impeccable in this.
But that elbow. Now, the second time around, I watched with a friend of mine who doesn't usually watch New Japan Pro Wrestling. She is big on Kenny and the Bucks and the Elite, and by virtue of that association, Kota Ibushi, and she shrieked when she saw Kota's lights get knocked out because it was brutal. And I watched it again, and there's just no way you can do that 100% safely. Like, there has to be some sort of lasting damage there. And even with the Stormbreaker, Ospreay was almost deadlifting Ibushi because he was knocked out. And then after the match, they did that stretcher job, which I initially thought was mostly story, but you've told me earlier today that Ibushi might have had a concussion.
Yeah, so essentially it was reported afterwards that Ibushi suffered a concussion during the match. We can't really say for certain because, let's put it this way, I know it was probably safer than a lot of us were expecting because of the Twitter accounts of both Will Ospreay and Kota Ibushi's neck, expecting things like jumping off the top of the Tokyo Dome itself onto each other, and it didn't never reach that sort of level of intensity. But there were a number of times that Ibushi landed on his head or on his neck. So it could have happened at the point where he put his head into the ring post for absolutely no reason, it seems. But yeah, it definitely could have happened with the rolling forearm at the end of it. And yeah, it's so I personally believe that the stretch job was always going to happen. I thought that was going to be like that was storyline, but I think the injury to Ibushi just plays into it a bit more. It sets Ospreay on a bit of a tear really, because he's tweeted afterwards about the fact that he's changed his style to be more aggressive, and that's what happens. It injures people.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. I was listening to Talk is Jericho where they previewed the card for this, and Jericho was really high on Ospreay and really calling for him to be a heavyweight. And I wanted to get your opinion on that. What do you think will happen there? Do you think Ospreay can be a heavyweight? Is that something you want to see for him? Do you think he can take the reins in case Kenny Omega, actually ends up leaving a New Japan? Do you think Ospreay can carry that foreigner load?
I don't want to put too much pressure on him in the sense of you can't expect everybody he definitely has like a significant amount of talent and ability, and he definitely deserves to be placed in a more prominent heavyweight position. But we can't just look at the guy and say, is this guy's going to be the next Kenny Omega? Because that puts too much pressure on people right out the gate. And I think he definitely can be in a prominent position. I could definitely see him holding at least in the Continental Championships by the time that next year rolls around, if he continues on this ascent, and then maybe eventually be a world champion. But right now, he's obviously in a good position with the Openweight Championship to give him just like that springboard into the main event level. And there's at the moment there's no obvious challenger for his title. I'd assume at some point he'd face Minoru Suzuki for it, because that would just be a complete mismatch of styles, but it would be a great way of working between like a submission specialist and brawler against a total high flyer. I think that match would be pretty good to see.
Yeah, and I think that match would go a long way in establishing Ospreay as a heavyweight, leaving, the juniors division behind. I do have to say that while this match wasn't Ospreay versus Ricochet in terms of flight, what they did nice and crisp, and I was anything but disappointed, and it was probably my second favorite match of the night.
No praise. Then we'll move on to, speaking of the juniors, we'll move on to the Junior Tag Team Championships, which was a three-way match between Los Ingobernables de Japón, Bushi and Shingo Takagi, against Suzuki Goons, Yoshinobu Kanemaru and El Desperado, and Roppongi 3K of Sho and Yo. This is probably what would class as the 2010 Diva bathroom break match. I think we've both spoken at length of how we kind of feel that the Junior Heavyweight Tag Team Championships has become a little bit obsolete, in the sense that a lot of the people that are now fighting for the main like tag team championships were previously fighting for the juniors, like the Young Bucks, and you'd assume that someone like a Tamatonga and Sonada are a similar height and build. But this match was, I would just class this as fine, really. It was nothing spectacular. It went less than 7 minutes. There was just like the traditional spots. It got quite chaotic at a few places, and then eventually Shingo Takagi won by pinning. I think it was Sho. It might have been Yo.
Yeah.
It was definitely one of the two. Yeah, so the champions avoided getting pinned, so it's likely that may lead to like a rematch down the road. But I would just like give this one like a subtle like 5-6 out of 10. Like, good job, and we'll move on to something else after that.
Yeah, I mean, as we've talked about, you know, when we weren't recording, the juniors tag division, I don't know if it really needs to be a thing. You know, there's a lot of championships on the show. Only one match wasn't for a championship belt. Now, a lot of these championships are used effectively, but this is one that isn't, especially with the style of wrestling progressing to a junior style almost being used in the heavyweight division as well. So, good match. I did kind of skim through it on the rerun because, again, not much to talk about. But yeah, fair match. And I knew, well, I don't want to say I knew, but I predicted that LIJ, this would be the start of their strong run.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of a lot of these teams could probably just mix it up with the normal tag teams. And it's a sense that New Japan, and it's one of the few criticisms I have of New Japan, they really, and it's a similar criticism to what I have in WWE, that they don't seem to give too much of a fuck about their tag team division. Which is obviously a criticism we level at WWE very often, but the difference with New Japan is that most of the matches that they have, the championships are good, and the people seem to care about them that are holding them, but they're never really placed on a very prominent position.
And that's unfortunate because at different points, tag team wrestling has been a huge staple in Japan, and at certain points carried it. You know, I think of Gallows and Anderson when they were tag teams. They were a big deal, as opposed to the two tag team champions we have now that are prominent, but not as, they're not carrying as much weight. And with the juniors, I really do feel like if they get the chance to mix it up with the heavyweights, it'll create a lot more competition and maybe create a reason to start caring about the tag team division more.
Yeah, I'd agree. So we move on to the next match, which I absolutely adored. Zack Sabre Jr. defeated Tomohiro Ishii for the British Heavyweight Championship. It's quite just interesting to just read that as a Wrestle Kingdom British Heavyweight Championship, due to New Japan's working relationship with Rev Pro in the UK. This match is, I mean, Zack Sabre Jr. is just absolutely incredible. Just the transitions into so many different submission holds, and then eventually he gets cocky, starts taking a few shots at Ishii, who just absorbs damage like it doesn't affect him at all, and then unleashes it all. I basically said during the call that he's basically the wrestler equivalent of the move Bide from Pokemon. Just sense like just absorbs damage and then releases it even more powerfully than he was delivered in the first place. And it was, I think one of the best spots was they had a superplex from the top rope, and then Zack Sabre Jr. just immediately just like pulls out of it, uses it to just wrench on Ishii's arm, and then just collapses afterwards, holding his neck because just realised that he'd just gone through a superplex. So, and the eventual result is Zack Sabre Jr. ties Ishii up in a virtually inescapable submission hold. And then I don't know whether Ishii even taps out or the referee just says, well, he's never getting out of that, so I have to stop the match essentially before he dies.
I think it was the old school, like, he said yes. You know, he didn't tap out, he didn't indicate submission with his hands, but I think they tried to say the referee asked him and he said yes. Now, the interesting thing about that is tomorrow, over in the UK, Zack Sabre Jr. has a match against the former Neville, now back to being Pac. And is this now a championship match?
That would be quite interesting. It depends whether like Neville is working with Rev Pro again. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me in total, but
Well, it is a Rev Pro match.
I guess so then. But it's just whether he has like a long-term relationship, that because Zack Sabre Jr. has been kind of the big star of Rev Pro for years and years at this point, and obviously Neville's and Park now has been with WWE for quite a few years, so it would be an interesting transition. They tend to not really give that like short reigns, so I'd be surprised that they'd only give Zack Sabre Jr. like a 2 or 3 day reign with the championship, but you never know. But yeah, this was another just excellent match. I think I've seen them do better when they've been given more time. Again, this wasn't a particularly long match, but for what it was, just a sprint with just basically every single submission move you could think of being applied to Ishii. A lot of focus on the arm because that's where Zack does most of his damage. Ishii fighting back with just the clotheslines, the powerful strikes, everything that you'd expect from like a guy of his size and build. I think it was the right choice to just put the championship back onto Sabre.
Yeah, I mean, the British heavyweight champion, back on a guy from the UK, I think it makes sense. And I don't think he loses it, even if it is a title match against Pac. I don't think he's losing it. I think Zack Sabre Jr., whether it's Ring of Honor, Rev Pro, or New Japan, is one of the best in the world, maybe the best from a straight up technical ability standpoint. And I think he's got a lot more time with that belt.
Okay, so next match was another triple threat tag team match, this time for the normal IWGP Tag Team Championships, where the team of Sonata and Evil, representing Los Ingobernables de Japón, defeated the champions Tama Tonga and Tangaloa, and the Young Bucks. Again, it was another really good match. I thought this one was better than the other triple threat tag. It like broke down, became a lot more chaotic towards the end. Just loads of people just hitting moves out of nowhere. I honestly, and this may just be just like me being hypercritical, I might have expected more from the Young Bucks in their final match in New Japan. I think they still did like enough to be exciting, like Nick Jackson jumping off the top rope, like doing this springboard onto the top rope and then like crashing over to the outside. Sonata was great. I thought Sonata was fantastic in this match. Just basically beating up everybody at rapid speed, doing his springboard moves and everything along those lines. Tama Tonga and Tangaloa were doing their nice guys gimmick, which essentially the fact that now it's 2019, like it's a new them. They're no longer like evil dicks, and they won't cheat to win matches. Even though Jardo on the outside was trying to get involved in every opportunity possible, and eventually him and Bad Luck Fale got involved in the match as well when the referee went down. That was another thing. Like there was a theme throughout the night. The referees getting involved in people's moves and getting knocked down a lot.
Yeah, the refereeing ability in New Japan is not very good. Let's just say that. This match in particular that stood out. I want to say the Nice Guys act from the Tongans, incredible. Absolutely made this match even more entertaining than it would have been from just a wrestling standpoint. There's a spot where Matt Jackson has a sharpshooter applied, and Tangaloa goes in to punch him, and Tama Tonga grabs his brother's arm. Like, no, we're not going to do it like that. They run outside the ring and push the rope so that Evil can reach the ropes, and they kind of give Evil a little pat on the head for doing so, and it's just very funny stuff. Outside of that, I mean, LIJ did wonderfully here. The Young Bucks kind of played their greatest hits, not even like a wild super kick party, but that's another theme of the night. There wasn't a lot of finishers, and when there were, they meant something. But the Young Bucks went out on their backs here, And while that wouldn't be the last time we see them at Wrestle Kingdom, that was the last time we saw them get physical, and they just did the right thing. You know, they announced All Elite Wrestling. They've said very openly they're not going to be in Japan. They're not going to be at Madison Square Garden. So this was it for them in Japan, and it was good.
Yeah, they went out the right way. I think the choice of Sonata and Evil back holding the championships for the first time in a few months is the right move. They're probably like the most fluent tag team on the roster right now. So yeah, I'm happy with the result, and the match itself was, again, it never reached the like highs as super spectacular, but it was fun for what it was.
You know, I think going forward, New Japan has to work a little bit on their tag teams. As we said, it's not a prominent thing for them. But I also think that with all of the faction stuff they have going on, maybe they feel like their tag teams are very easily built in, that they don't have to focus too much.
Yeah, I think they have like a standard like tag team division, which essentially like Evil and Sonata, Gorillas of Destiny, Killer Elite Squad. They throw Ishii and Yano together every now and again and stuff like that. So I think they're pretty set with the tag teams they have. They just need to. I don't want to say they need to give them more prominent position, but we need to have more straight up tag team matches, because it kind of feels like with Wrestle Kingdom, like these two matches were kind of just thrown on. They just threw every tag team that they had available into those matches, rather than it being built up as more of a heated rivalry between two teams. That's
Right.
just me. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one, which was the IWGP United States Championship with Juice Robinson defeating Cody. This was, now we have to obviously preface this with the fact that Cody was going into this match injured, and still hasn't like taken surgery on his leg, which he's been meaning to do for a while. And so the match was short. It was kind of hampered by that injury. It was kind of just like, I don't want to say greatest hits match, but it was, we'll hit a big move, we'll hit a signature, we'll hit a finisher. That'll kind of be just the standard thing. We'll sell it, and then we'll just get up, and then we'll hit another finisher and a signature move and stuff like that. Brandy Rhodes got involved a lot, interfering from the outset to try and like put Juice Robinson off, and she ended up getting into the ring and spearing him and beating him up, leading to the referee. Not disqualification or anything like that, but instead just throwing her out of the building.
And not in a WWE, you're out of here, but in a, okay, you're out.
Go. Yeah, go.
Get out.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah, and it's just like, so she left despondent. Cody took advantage, tried to hit Crossroads, nearly got the pinfall there, but eventually Juice Robinson hit 3 pulp frictions. Oh, actually, was it 3 or was it just 2? I think it was 2, actually.
It was two.
Yeah, just 2. So he hit 2 pulp frictions. I think that was just meant to be like the explanation point, because he was annoyed at how much like Cody was cheating and Brandy had got involved. And then he reclaims the United States Championship, which he lost to Cody a few months back. So good match, I'd say. It's not really sort of like super spectacular, just due to the fact that Cody was hampered, but it achieved its goal of putting some momentum back behind Juice Robinson.
It was definitely the weakest match on the card, in my opinion, but it was solely due to Cody's injury. There was a moment where Cody tried to hit pulp friction on Juice, and he was having the hardest time, and he couldn't jump with it because of the torn meniscus. I think they said he was getting surgery, win, lose, or draw. So maybe now that he can focus on business-related ventures with All Elite, he'll take some time away from the ring to get the surgery done. And yeah, not a strong farewell for Cody, but, you know, again, doing the right thing, going out on your back. Brandy was great in her role. I'm not crazy about Juice at all. Like, there's times where I'm really like, wow, Juice is fantastic. And there's times where I'm indifferent towards him. And this was one of the times where I was indifferent.
Yeah, I think the like overall quality of the match kind of hurt that side of him a little bit more. It's just a case of Cody's heel work, as usual, was on point. It's always been my kind of complaint with Cody, is just the heel work and the mannerisms and all that attitude is always on point. His actual work in the ring is a little bit less to be desired. But I'm a huge fan of Juice Robinson. I think if it does come to Kenny Omega leaving New Japan, Juice Robinson should be pushed as like the main babyface, like non-Japanese guy.
From a babyface standpoint, I think Juice is the only option that you have right now. But I think eventually, Juice will get that aggression that he needs. I don't think he has it yet. I think he's still, like a very fun character. I think as he gets more aggressive, he'll be a better player in New Japan. But you said something interesting before this. You called this title the equivalent of the European Championship?
No, it was more the Openweight Championship is more of like the European one. This one like it fluctuates depending on who's holding it, with the Intercontinental Championship to be like the second belt.
Yeah, no, like last year this belt was in the semi-main because of Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega's match. I don't know if Juice is the guy who will be holding it. I guess we can talk about what happened tonight. It seems like Beretta will be challenging Juice Robinson. I
wouldn't say that's a certainty. I think that's definitely an option, but I think Juice needs to have a long reign with this title, because his reign last time was essentially hampered by the fact that he suffered a broken hand, so he couldn't perform up to his normal standards. He was in the G1 and he had a very poor G1 in terms of results, and then he lost it immediately in his first defense against Cody. So I think he needs a successful reign with the title. I'd be very much against anyone taking it away from him until a good few months down the line.
I would agree.
And it's a sense of, we'll obviously talk about Cody's cyclical way of doing things in the same way that he did for Ring of Honor, where his first match was against Jay Lethal, his last match against Jay Lethal. This Juice Robinson was his first match on Wrestle Kingdom, and this was his last match in Wrestle Kingdom, and he faced Juice Robinson. So Cody's very good at that sort of thing, just like bookending his stints with different companies.
Yeah, not much else to say here. Cody, moving on to do All Elite, he did say that he would be back in Japan. He tweeted that out. I don't think we can read much into that, other than he wants to be back in Japan one day. And I think all of his focus is on whatever this new venture is and whatever All Elite will be.
Okay, so our next match was for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. Taiji Ishimori defeating Kushida. I absolutely loved this match. I thought, from a standard just wrestling standpoint, just like as a technical wrestling event. I mean, obviously technical wrestling, you talk about someone like Zack Sabre Jr., but just as a straight up, no real story behind it wrestling match, this was excellent, absolutely great.
Before we talk about that, I think we have to talk about Kushida's entrance.
Oh, yeah, of course. So Kushida obviously is known for the Back to Future references. So after Taiji Ishimori's made his entrances down the ring, there is a tiny person comes out. I assume it's a child, but it could be.
I think it was a child.
Yeah, and they're wearing the most terrifying replica of Kushida's head, and it looks like a really tiny Kushida, and we were just watching it freak the fuck out, because it's I mean, if you're just wearing just a standard Kushida mask, like one of these plastic wrestling masks that looks vaguely like the person, but it's obvious that it's not that person. But that was just too lifelike.
It was almost like they really did get some sort of skin mask of Kushida. It was very creepy.
And then Taguchi comes out playing Doc Brown, and essentially plays the like works with the flux capacitor. There's a lot of smoke that comes up, or like the smoke machines, and then he comes up and then he's just the real Kushida, and then he comes out to the ring and he has this excellent match. There were so many just like really good transitions and sequences and moves in this match. That like immediately Kushida targets the arm of Ishimori because he wants to go for the hoverboard lock. But just like the way they were floating over in so many different like drop kick situations and just transitioning in so many different sort of holds, I thought it was so well put together.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. Great match.
It's hard to say really because like these two are so good, but they kind of lack the charisma or character as some other people like Marty Scurll or Will Ospreay or Hiromu in the junior heavyweight championship. But in terms of like, just actual match quality, these two just deliver constantly.
And I think you have to say Hiromu would have been in this match had it not been.
Almost certainly, yeah.
Yeah, he got injured. I think in the match that he won the title, did he not?
No, he was injured in a match with Dragon Lee.
And unfortunately, it's not known a timetable for him.
No, so like in the meantime, these two are good like standard bearers. Like I've always seen Kushida as the standard bearer of the junior heavyweight like division. Like he's similar to, I guess if you want to make like a WCW comparison, he's like the Dean Malenko of the cruiserweight division. Only just far more, I don't say far more athletic, but like a lot more extravagant with some of his moves. And yeah, I just thought it was just it's hard to like pick out like just a few spots from this one because it was just all seamless and put together. But I thought like Ishimori's way of like finishing the match, like you just saw the move hit, and then you just knew it was kind of over. Like it was like we've been saying, it's like one finisher and it's done. And this match was a lot of trying to escape from like finishers being hit. It's just a good way of doing it.
Belief of Kushida going to WWE?
No. And
yeah, I don't think so either.
It's not so much a belief that it's going to happen. It's just a case of like it's almost a definite want of it not happening. Just because a guy of his level of talent could just thrive anywhere, but in WWE he would just be put into 205 Live. And I don't want to sound like that needs to say it's like a death sentence or anything along those lines, but he's someone who has a lot more potential and would be featured far more prominently if he stays in New Japan.
I agree.
So yeah, it's like a very, very solid match. Then we move on to like the first match that got a real sort of build in terms of video packages. There's only non-title match on the card as well. Well, besides the like pre-show, it was Jay White defeated Kazuchika Okada in just like a one-on-one like blood feud match. I guess the most notable thing to talk about before we get into the actual details of the match was the fact that Okada came out as the Rainmaker.
Yes.
After like so many months being like the lost Okada character, where he was kind of relieved of his duties as world champion and was decided to use the opportunity to be a bit more, let his hair down, be a bit more of a party attitude. Obviously came out with the balloons and the dyed red hair, the red tights. But this time he decided he's going to take this match seriously and came out like full Rainmaker regalia, the robe, the trunks, the like his money falling from the sky. The crowd went crazy the crowd went crazy for that entrance because like it felt like this is the real Okada coming back. But even though he came back as like this the like real Okada almost, Jay White still defeated him.
First of all, I want to say I've never seen such a genuine reaction for a man's wrestling gear. The way that people just celebrated Kazuchika Okada returning to the trunks. And people were just loving it and so happy that he's back. He's the Rainmaker. And then after all that, one Blade Runner, as we've been talking about. It's only taken one finisher. And Switchblade Jay White puts him away. And I think it really sold not only me, but people watching. 2019 is going to be the year of Switchblade Jay White. That's not to say Okada is going to move down the card. I think it's a longer story progression where he'll eventually be back in the main event of Wrestle Kingdom, maybe even next year. But right now, Jay White is on fire.
Yeah, this match was... I mean, it's an Okada match, so it's going to be great no matter what. I thought, like, Okada obviously gets so much out of... I don't want to say so little, but he gets so much out of his mannerisms and the way that... It's not so much like the moves that he hits, it's the way he hits them is always so, like, effective. And his big spot is the drop kick. Like, there is no wrestler that gets so much heat or so much a reaction out of a drop kick as Kazuchika Okada does. And Jay White was matching him step for step. Like, obviously can't say that Okada carried him, but Jay White was definitely holding up his end of the bargain. Gedo was getting involved every now and again. Obviously, the former manager of Okada, now with Jay White. But I think the real crux of what made this match so great was the constant transitions out of trying to get out of each other's finishing move. Like, every time Okada was going for the Rainmaker, Jay White would counter, and then Jay White would go for the Blade Runner, and Okada would get out of it. It was just that there was I must have been like nearly a dozen transitions in total out of finishing holds, and then as soon as one Blade Runner hit, it was over, and that's such perfect storytelling.
And what do you think happens next for Okada?
Okada's a difficult one to suggest because it's hard to picture him going for any championship that's not the World Championship because he's been so synonymous with that title for the last like 5 years or so. But I don't know, challenging Naito. Well, obviously we'll talk about Naito's Intercontinental Championships down the line, but at the moment it seems like he's still kind of stuck in like battling Jay White, but in a slightly different capacity. So maybe he'll have some matches with Bad Luck Fale, or I don't know, maybe transition into a tag team with someone for a while. He's someone who's, even though he's back to the Rainmaker, he's still kind of lost in terms of clear direction. But the one thing you know with Okada is that they do have plans for him because he's the guy. But it's more obvious where Jay White is going because obviously we'll talk about who won if you don't want to be spoiled before the end of it. But Jay White ends the night challenging the IWGP Heavyweight Champion, and he will almost certainly be the next challenger for the title.
And have you ever seen a meteoric rise like Jay White's that just sold you on a character? Because last year...
Ronda Rousey.
Well, okay, but Ronda Rousey's Ronda Rousey. And...
Yeah. From Jay White, from where he was, because after like Wrestle Kingdom 12, his match against Tanahashi was kind of really the only underwhelming thing about that card. And a lot of people probably thought he was dead on arrival at that point. But how he's transitioned into being like one of arguably the top heel in all of New Japan is like credit to the way he's been booked. And his work obviously as well.
Last year when he challenged Tanahashi, I was really down on him. I'm like, why is this guy getting a shot? And this year he takes out Okada and it feels so right. They've done so well with him over the last year, really making him a credible character. And, kudos to NJPW and kudos to Jay White for putting in the work too.
In terms of like, obviously with Jay White going to be the next challenger, Okada, I can imagine like him just sitting back a little bit in the wilderness until the New Japan Cup, and I could easily see him winning that. But
now, there's an idea floating around that the winner of the New Japan Cup should challenge for the title at Madison Square Garden. Do you think Okada would be a good challenger for the Garden?
Well, I think Okada's like good for basically any card you want to put on. So, yeah, I'd say so. I don't think it needs to be. Okada's huge enough that it doesn't need to be like just because it's an MSG show you need to put an American on there or some like North American. Okada's like universally beloved. And so I can see him challenging for the title in there if they decide to put it onto that show. It depends whether New Japan wants to save it for one of their own shows as opposed to one which is technically under the Ring of Honor banner.
I don't know. I think that this has to. This may be the time to put a guy like Okada in a major match in the U.S. because the Garden show, you can say it's Ring of Honor, but it's a New Japan show at the Garden, and it should be treated very specially because they may never get this chance again.
Potentially. But we'll obviously see how it goes. There's a lot up in the air with Okada in general. But we'll move on to the first of two main event matches they claimed it as, which is for the IWGP Intercontinental Championship. Tetsuya Naito defeated Chris Jericho. It was a no DQ match, and this match was so different from any other match on the card, and that's what made it. Well, obviously, a lot of it made it spectacular, but some of the talk about Chris Jericho, a guy who's done everything, and at this point in time could be forgiven for resting on his laurels, because there's a lot of people who have reached that age and then just they do all their greatest hits and then they move on. But somebody who's just evolved his character and then takes as many risks as he does in this match with Tetsuya Naito, and Tetsuya Naito as well. I mean, one of the first moves of this match was Chris Jericho getting pile drived on the ramp. And just that set the tone for a match that was absolutely chaotic. So many weapon shots, Singapore canes, tables, chairs.
That pile driver onto the ramp was one of the most nasty spots I've seen in a while. There's something about the pile driver. It's this banned move that we know can cause a lot of damage. And whenever you see it, especially when it makes a thud onto a ramp, it just sounds and feels brutal. And Jericho would later DDT Naito on a table, and same thing, that just very strong thud and great brawl. When I think about it, the main event was too good, but this was almost my favorite match on the card because it was just so wild and chaotic. And Jericho has done wonders in 2018, and he's really shined in this New Japan role where he's having a lot of fun being a modern day Bruiser Brody, because styles have changed so much that he can be that bigger, brawler kind of guy, and he's really relishing the position. I talked a lot with you about, well, if Naito wins, does Naito respect the belt? And you held firm that no, it's a key part of his character to not do that. And sure enough, Naito used the title to knock out Chris Jericho and threw it like yesterday's news before hitting two Destinos to get the championship victory. And yeah, Naito vanquished Chris Jericho. Still doesn't care about being Intercontinental Champion. Doesn't need it. Doesn't want it.
No, he's got a long-standing hatred for that belt. But I just want to go back to a few highlights from the match, obviously. The DDT, I think we can't really undersell too much in the fact that Naito just landed on his head and did a full headstand going over on the table, which just looked absolutely sick. Jericho just beating him up with steel chairs constantly. The Singapore cane, it felt relevant because obviously as WWE watchers, we've become kind of tired with the Singapore cane because it's like a trope that, oh, well, it's an OGQ match. How long is it going to be before the Singapore cane comes out? But with the crowd reaction, because they don't see it very often in New Japan, the crowd obviously would see every single strike and it would feel big.
And I think that's another thing about this match as well. The crowd was quiet for the first few matches. They really came alive for the Okada Switchblade match. They were at a fever pitch here. They were loud. Naito is the closest thing to a Stone Cold Steve Austin that New Japan has, and they really wanted to see him win.
Oh yeah, and the crowd absolutely detested Jericho. He does such a great job of it, like playing the heel role that he's currently got. Whenever they put like the Walls of Jericho on, the crowd just comes alive because they're just so desperate for Naito to get to the ropes or something. Even though obviously getting to the ropes in this match wouldn't have counted anything because it's no DQ, but he obviously got out of it one time by using the Singapore cane on the back of Jericho. Jericho hit 2 code breakers and Naito kicked out of both of them. So it was good because obviously throughout the night they'd made a point of the fact that we're not kicking out of finishers as soon as they hit. But in this match, the fact that Naito kicked out of 2 code breakers, just that made it so much more impactful. Rather than this being, oh, this is WrestleMania, so this is you need to hit 3 finishes to win a match in every single match type scenario.
And he might have been the only person to kick out of 2 finishers.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think obviously we can talk about this side of things now because after there's no like certainty over Jericho. There obviously you mentioned that Jericho's seemingly challenged Tanahashi at some point for the championship, but he didn't appear at all at the New Year's Dash. There's no real clear certainty over what his future is, and that's kind of the way Jericho likes it. He likes being like uncertain or to keep people on their toes about what he's going to do next. Whereas Naito's found himself a one-way trip to hell because he will be his first challenger for the Intercontinental Championship is going to be Taichi. Now, Taichi didn't even have the grace to appear in the pre-show, let alone the Wrestle Kingdom in general. And Taichi has a very, very poor reputation among fans of New Japan. If you're not a watcher of New Japan in general, Taichi's kind of the equivalent of what Tony thinks of Alberto Del Rio.
Yeah, Taichi isn't the person that I would have picked to have challenged Tetsuya Naito. I mean, especially when you have talent like a Suzuki who, lost the belt to Naito. Or you have a Zack Sabre Jr. But I'll say this about Taichi and this about Naito as well. He's been taking a lot of vicious attacks. You got that DDT, you got all the kendo stick shots, and a fucking chair shot to the head by Taichi at New Year's Dash. And yeah, he's got to be hurt. And I know I was calling for it last night in the no DQ match, but after seeing a chair shot to the head tonight and like how much it shook me, I really remember why they don't do those anymore, because they're just so violent and so brutal.
Yeah, I mean it helps for the fact that obviously that you don't see them as much anymore, so now they feel special again. But it was quite difficult to see with the fact that he clearly didn't get his hand up to protect it. It was just a straight chair shot to the head, and it's kind of just like I don't like seeing that in any context, even if it is it does feel special and it does feel like. And don't get me wrong, even though I'm not a huge fan of Taichi, the way they built him up to be the next challenger for Naito is probably about as strong as you can build someone up to do that. Essentially, he just absolutely decimated Naito and then pinned him at the end of the match. So there's literally nothing else you can do to suggest that this guy's going to be a strong challenger for Naito. But we probably can at least have an assumption that this will probably just be a title defense for Naito, and then he'll move on to who the real challenger is going to be next. But we'll wait and see. Taichi's always had a history of surprising people. But yeah, this match was big thumbs up. Jericho has had left a very positive, lasting impression in New Japan. He clearly still has, obviously not the same level of athleticism, but he's changed his style enough that it still feels like Chris Jericho. Still feels as special. So yeah, this is a big deal.
And I think that's fun that he doesn't have the same level of athleticism. He's older, he's wiser, he's feeling smarter. And I gotta say, that lion salt he hit last night was picture perfect.
Covered a lot of distance, yeah.
Yeah, Jericho still got it.
he's obviously now transitioned into more of a brawler role, but he can still do the like flying crossbodies, the springboard drop kicks, the lion salt. He can still pull out those moves. And somebody in his, is it like late 40s now? He's definitely in his 40s.
Yeah, 46, 47.
Yeah, so yeah, somebody in that age that can still do that. He's kept himself in really good shape. And well, not. I think Tony will probably disagree after looking at him and says, "Oh, that's
Yeah,
like,
Tony.
that old man skin is starting to like expand almost."
Yeah, maybe we should go back and say what Tony was thinking a little bit here. Tony was not a fan of
The look of Jericho.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
he was
was
just.
like, he said it didn't register for him as
It's not
Chris
Jericho. Yeah, well, it's not the WWE Jericho. The New Japan Jericho is a lot of fun though, and he's proven to be. So, and it's good that he, if this is his last time, I mean you never know with Jericho, but he did the right thing of going out, and he went out in about as strong as match as he possibly could have. It was very, very. I don't want to say it was better than the match with Omega because I don't think it was, but it was very comparable at the very least.
And I think the match with Omega knew how to work an American hardcore style. I think this was a different match in the sense that that's not Naito's style.
No, but I think Naito added to it with the sense like he would spit on Jericho and stuff like that, and was a bit more just like laissez-faire about the whole thing, really.
Yeah, and also referee. There was a weird spot where Jericho pushed his red shoes to be able to low blow Naito, which I used the excuse that it was a distraction because he didn't need to push him because it was a no DQ match.
Yeah,
But these referees were just all over the place, weren't they?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, the referees were just like so heavily involved with a lot of stuff. I kind of just try and think of that as an excuse of like Chris Jericho just did it out of just instinct, like he would naturally in these sort of matches just push the referee and hit a low blow. It's just a sense of like even though he just maybe just forgot for the second that it was an ODQ match, and I think that kind of works as a story thing. Like you're in the heat of a match, you're not just gonna. Sometimes you're just gonna think that it's just a normal match, rather than like what stipulations are involved.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's fine. But this led on perfectly into the main event, which was for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. Hiroshi Tanahashi defeated Kenny Omega. This match is now we've been spoiled with a load of amazing New Japan like main event matches in 2018. I'd put this right among like the very best of them in terms of a storytelling device. Like, if you wanted to just like, we talk about how the Ciampa Gargano matches are a similar stature. Like, you want to show someone how to do storytelling in a match, you show them that match. You also show them this match because essentially the story leading up to this was Kenny Omega believes that he is like the new way of wrestling, and Tanahashi believes that in the more traditional side of things and thinks that Omega is going about wrestling the wrong way. And that built up a lot of animosity between the two because Omega considered himself like an artist or a guy who's taking wrestling to the next level. And so if somebody tells him that the old way is better or that his way is not real wrestling, he's going to take offense to it. And he essentially just treats Tanahashi as a bitter old man. And that played off in the match because they were just slapping the fuck out of each other. There was a lot of slaps in this match. Tanahashi goes after Omega's knee a lot during the thing because Tanahashi does have a lot of moves which target the leg, and there was one in particular which was a dragon screw off the top rope, which just seemed to just cripple.
Fucking
Omega.
Nasty, dude.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But it doesn't stop Omega from hitting like his traditional 6 or 7 V triggers during a match. But every one of those was like really good connection. There was a table spot as well. Tanahashi decided to just go against earlier on in the match when the table was out. Tanahashi decided to forego using the table and throw Omega back into the ring because he didn't want to win that way. But instead, later on in the match, after Omega had fucked him over a few times and stuff like that, so he was getting rather pissed with him, just throws him onto the table, goes for the high fly flow. Omega moves and he just goes crashing straight through the table. There was a lot of action on the outside, Omega doing like moonsaults to the outside off the barricade. But the stuff within the ring was just so poignant, and it all made such a huge amount of sense as well, just based in the story they'd been telling in the lead up to it. Omega's almost untouchable in that regard. And Tanahashi has obviously done that for so many years at this point, that you put these two together, and while it would not have the same level of athleticism and drive as an Omega Okada match has, the fact that these two are such great storytellers means that it doesn't need to be as much. That's kind of like my overall kind of just semblance of the match being just a brilliant storytelling device and a perfect way to end the show.
This match, to me, it really did represent true feelings of fans and, people who have been thinking this Western expansion is being pushed too heavy. A lot of people did feel like Omega was underwhelming as a champion. I'm not one of them, but I saw a lot of it on my social media feeds saying, why are we doing triple threat matches in Japan? These matches with Cody haven't been good. And I feel like New Japan made a conscious decision to go back to their roots. Now, we didn't see Omega. We saw none of the Elite or Chris Jericho at New Year's Dash. And I don't know if that means Omega is going to All Elite. There's a lot of people. Somebody sent me a Reddit post with this person basically crying that, Kenny Omega, you motherfucker, you're going to take the money from WWE. And,
Still with some me, damn it.
Yeah, I was like, you've sold out. How can you do this? And that's not official. Omega was in the ring at All In when they said we're sticking together. So if he's going anywhere, I have to assume it's going to be All Elite. But Omega seems to be done with New Japan. And to me, that's surprising because the promotion was built so much around him and this changing the world concept. And I don't know, I feel like maybe it was too soon.
I think obviously there's a lot of speculation we can draw out of this, and the fun thing about it is that all options are pretty much on the table. There is the likelihood that he still is with New Japan, and he's teasing the fact that he is going because, well, obviously it's good to get people speculating and thinking, and then if he does return to New Japan and re-sign with them, then it's even more spectacular that, oh my god, he's back and he's going after his championship again. He could obviously go with All Elite Wrestling because it's the Bucks and it's Cody and all the people that he's worked with closely, so it makes sense. He could go to WWE and appear in the Royal Rumble because he's done a huge amount on the independent scene and with New Japan that maybe it's time that he gives WWE a shot. There is literally everything is on the table when it comes to Kenny Omega, except I'm pretty sure we won't see him in the Impact Zone, but that's just my prediction at this point in time.
Well, now you never know.
if this was his final match in New Japan, then it's kind of the Omega match to go out on, which is a match which is very story driven, very character based. Obviously, the match with Okada kind of will always be his lasting legacy, but to do this with Tanahashi, who's just been the guy in New Japan for the last nearly 20 years at this point, it's just it was almost more fitting for Omega to bow out in a match like this, as opposed to the match with Okada.
I think this match was Kenny Omega saying, I wanted to change the world, I tried to, but I'm going to go off and do this other thing. And I don't think he's done with New Japan. I think he'll be back, even if it's not. Listen, we keep talking about All Elite, but we don't know. This could not work out. Maybe they all end up back in Japan soon. And I think Kenny Omega will forever be linked to New Japan. Even if All Elite Wrestling becomes, in some alternate universe bigger than WWE, I think Kenny Omega will always be seen as a New Japan guy, and for the work he did there, he's going to be seen as one of the better Gaijin champions.
Oh, absolutely. Just a few more obviously notes from the match before we sign off with this. There was a great spot with like one of the first attempts at the high fly flow where Omega gets his legs up at the absolute last second. And obviously, I quite like that in the sense of it adds a bit of surprise to it, rather than just like getting the legs up almost before the guy jumps, which you sometimes see in like matches where the guys are less talented than these two. You obviously had the dive to the outside as well, which seemed to both injure Omega's back and have his leg hit Tanahashi right in the face.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if that was put together as well as it should be.
They definitely made connection, which is better than some spots that we've seen, but that definitely hurt Omega, and that's what I alluded to with the Ibushi match being, every time Ibushi dived or Ospreay dived, they caught each other perfectly. This did not happen here.
Yeah, that was one instance where it seemed to go a little bit wrong. Tanahashi hit the high fly flow and Omega kicked out, but the interesting thing about it is the fact that Omega did not once hit the one-winged angel. So that move still has yet to be kicked out of, at least like the law suggests that way. And Tanahashi got out of it, made his comeback, hit like another high fly flow, and got the victory. And for the first time in a good few years now, Tanahashi is back on top of the mountain.
I think we're going to get into a little bit of what happened at New Year Dash, and they keep alluding to the fact that Tanahashi's old, so I don't think he holds it forever.
I won't hold it forever, but I think it's a sense like this was from almost the point that Omega won the championship. I think I don't want to say like it obviously made it underwhelming because the journey for Omega to win the championship was kind of the big story, and then I don't want to say he faded into the background, but he became secondary to Tanahashi's journey. It's like the stories in New Japan now seem to be revolving more around the challengers than the champion. Because previously with Okada, it was all about the champion, like how long he's going to hold the title for, how many defenses is he going to make, all that stuff. Whereas now it's all revolving around the challengers, probably around Omega eventually challenging Okada, Tanahashi's redemption after seemingly being over the hill and no longer being able to challenge for the championship, winning the G1 climax, coming back, defending it, defeating Okada for the first time in many years, and then obviously culminating with him winning the title here. And now it seems, obviously we'll talk about New Year's Dash now, the story is about Jay White, who is going to be the first challenger for Tanahashi's title. He challenged Tanahashi in the post Wrestle Kingdom press conference, and he left Tanahashi laying at the end of tonight as well. He pinned Yoshihashi in their 6-man tag team match they had, but he challenged Tanahashi to get into the ring with him. He did, and got beaten up by White and Gedo and Bad Luck Fale, and they laid out Okada as well. It does seem like they're really pushing Jay White hard as like the next big guy.
I do think it's worth saying there were a lot of Finn Balor references tonight, and how Jay White is taking Bullet Club back to that era where Finn Balor or Prince Devitt had control, and they were very, hard hitting, and they're bad guys. And their thing used to be, Bullet Club is real. And Jay White at the post-show press conference for New Year Dash said, hey, Jay White is real, and he did the finger gun, and he says, Bullet Club, it's real again. And I just thought that was interesting. And I'm very interested to see what they do with Okada. Jay White.
I think it is an interesting take on it, because there is the argument that even though the Elite made the Bullet Club bigger, in the sense of like it added a bit more eyes to it, it kind of took away the essence of what Bullet Club originally was, which was a bunch of like gaijins and like the two Samoans as well, Bad Luck Fale and Tomatonga, who felt that they were being underappreciated and were there to essentially take out all of the Japanese guys that had staked their claim in New Japan. And when the Elite came on board, it became more about not so much like having fun or anything like that, but it was just about them being on top and winning titles and like showing off our art form and showing them why we're the best wrestlers. Whereas these guys, they don't really care about. Like Jay White wants to be the best, but they don't care about showing like the best in terms of like their in-ring ability. They just want to show that they're the baddest motherfuckers in the promotion.
Yeah,
And that's a nice way to take it. A nice like it's not so much an evolution of Bullet Club. It's almost like a reversion, but in being a reversion, it's also an evolution because it's new people on top. So
I'm really. I'll just wrap it up here. I didn't like the fact that there were no real follow throughs and a lot of the guys who put the eyes on Wrestle Kingdom, but maybe they feel like their stories ended there, and now it's all about pushing this new year. And in this new year, it really does look like it's going to be all about the Switchblade. And he's the one I'm looking at going forward, as well as Suzuki-gun and LIJ's rivalry, and seeing which group comes out on top there. My prediction is still it's going to be Naito and Jay White next year at the Dome. But we'll see. The question I have for you is, do you think that the New Japan boom is going to settle now that a lot of the major stars from the States have moved on?
it depends what you class as a boom. If you class the boom as like international expansion, maybe it takes a slight hit. I think the emphasis that they've left, like people like Omega and the Bucks and Cody, has at least attracted new eyes to people within New Japan that they may not have even seen or heard of beforehand, but that maybe have become fans of in the period between it. I don't think it subsides. I think it might take a bit more of a gradual impact than it previously was, but I think it's far from over. And we always have to hope that, as great as the Elite are, and they are phenomenal and they've done so well for themselves, we can't just assume that other people aren't going to not to create their own elite, but build themselves up into the same position of prominence. I mean, who thought like 5 years ago that Kenny Omega would be the star that he is now? They'd obviously think he was a big deal, but he reached the level he is. Who thought that when the Young Bucks were Generation Me in TNA, that these two would be like ruling the wrestling world and like selling more merchandise than pretty much anybody? Who thought when Cody was teaming up with Hardcore Holly and Drew McIntyre and then in the like wearing a mask in the middle of WWE that he would be arguably like wrestling's most talked about star outside of WWE right now? It's just you never know where it's going to come from, and I think there's enough potential in people like Jay White and Juice Robinson, Will Ospreay, and obviously the Japanese contingent as well that's always been wildly popular, that they can like form like that they can continue to appeal to the Western audience and continue to expand it. Maybe not at the same rate, but still do enough.
I think that's fair.
I guess the only thing left to do is give just overall thoughts, just thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs up on Kingdom, thumbs down on New Year's Dash. If you're somebody who felt like you needed to wake up to see if you were going to miss anything major, you could have waited and caught it later on New Japan World. I think thumbs up overall on New Japan. I think 2018 was a great year. I'm hoping the same for 2019. And really, the only questions I have now are what happens next with Tanahashi, Jay White, and the future of the Elite, but that might not even concern New Japan.
Yeah, I'll just round off saying, yep, it was an amazing show. Oh, maybe not amazing, it's going a bit too far, but by the standards of New Japan, it was a very, very good show. By any other standards, it was a fantastic show. All matches delivered to at least a good enough extent. Main event, I think, is a match that if you don't even watch New Japan regularly, I think the final 3 matches in general, or actually even 4 with the Junior Championship match, even if you don't watch New Japan regularly, you should go out your way to see those 4 matches. I think you'd be like very, very satisfied. And obviously the Will Ospreay Kota Ibushi match at the start as well. But yeah, I think even though it didn't live up to the same expectations as Wrestle Kingdom 12, I thought it was a great show, a great way to start the year. It's just something that gets you excited about wrestling again. January's the month where you get excited about wrestling again. After so many months of just like turgid dross, and this January in particular with the announcement of All Elite Wrestling, the Royal Rumble's coming up. We've got takeover shows in both the UK and in Phoenix as well. We've got TNA with their homecoming show. There's a lot to be excited about this January, and it means a lot of work for people like us who decide to report on this.
Legitimately, it's 8:34 in the morning. I'm going to sign off here and immediately get to work on WrestleZone and eWrestling News. I'm looking forward to this year, specifically January. By the end of Tuesday, we will know more about the Royal Rumble, know more about All Elite Wrestling, and possibly have a date for Double or Nothing, and maybe even more major announcements beyond that. Wrestling is in the best shape it's been in 20 years. I don't think that's an arguable point. What do you think?
I'd say it was pretty arguable considering the fact that it's less popular overall than it was back then.
Well, I think after sitting through the dredges of the early 2000s and, even the early part of this decade, wrestling it's definitely healthier.
It's exciting for people who are big fans of wrestling. It just doesn't have the mainstream appeal that it used to have. But
that's true.
But in a time where there's a feeling that there's a lot of change and a lot of development coming, and that's exciting for people like us.
And I want to see where it goes. And with that said, I will let you round us out.
Okay, well, I'll lead us with some plugs then. So, obviously, you can check out Smark Out Moment for a lot of smarkoutmoment.com for like all the great articles, weekly stuff. You can check out recaps of different shows. You can follow me in particular at Wigmeister14 on Twitter. I do like the power rankings, but there's obviously loads of other weekly articles you can check out. Smark Out Moment. You can join us, like get involved in the conversation at the Megamaniacs on Facebook. Just search for the Megamaniacs or go to facebook.com/the Megamaniacs, and you'll be able to find us, have some conversations about wrestling, get involved with, just tell us what you thought about New Japan, what you think about what's going to happen with All Elite Wrestling, any stuff like that. Just throw a comment down there. You can obviously comment on the video below. Just tweet at us, talk to us. We want to just get involved, make sure that you get your opinions out there. Let us know what you thought about Wrestle Kingdom 13, what you thought about New Year's Dash, everything like that. Rob, what plugs do you have?
Well, I want to say, if you enjoyed this, if you enjoyed it being me and Callum, and giving Tony a little bit of a break, let us know in the comments. And
we'll kill him.
We might, but I think he's already doing that to himself slowly but surely. Let us know in the comments. I have ideas for podcasts. Callum has great ideas for podcasts. So we want to expand Smark Out Moment, but we need your help to do it. And you can do that by letting us know how you feel. There is the Patreon account. So, if you feel like tossing a couple of bucks our way, you can do that at patreon.com/smarkoutmoment. And on Tony's side of things, because he's not here, but he is our fearless leader, there is Fanboys Anonymous. You can check all that out by searching the social medias for Fanboys Anonymous. For me, I'm at Twitter. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at DeFelice. I will be working WrestleZone. The weekend news I'm covering Impact Homecoming tomorrow, so that should be a time. E-wrestling news, all that good stuff. It's 8 in the morning. I've been up since 4. I'm a little punchy.
Yeah, I can tell.
This was a really good time. I hope to do more stuff like this. Callum, thank you. This is great. And
For a
since you've
first time
hosted the
hosting
thing,
gig, yeah.
since
Are
you've
you
hosted the
you want to
thing,
sign us off?
I was, you know what? I will sign us off. Thank you, everybody. Well, this has been the Smark Out moment, and we are being counted out.